The handout that you just got, dealing with the 6 basic principles. This handout goes hand in hand with your government alive text, and it's going to be a little bit different than what you read in chapter 3, section 1. But then again, it's not that different. Okay? Government books talk about government issues, and most government books recognize that there are 6 basic principles towards in the Constitution. 6 basic principles limiting government. And we're going to go through each one of these 6 and discuss them real briefly. First and foremost is popular sovereignty. Because government is created by and for the people, power resides not with the government or its leaders, but with the people. In a representative democracy, the people vote to elect leaders to represent their interests. Simply put, the document that we've been studying, the Constitution, begins with 3 little words: we the people. Not we the privileged few, not we the rich and powerful, not we the landed aristocracy who are in that position simply because our daddy is in that position. We the people. Now, popular sovereignty, where have we seen that reflected? Within this last month. Alluded to that right before we went to lunch. Where have we seen popular sovereignty happen?
Presidential election.
Presidential election. It's not the most direct form of popular sovereignty, but yeah. People going to the polls, voting for those representatives that they choose. Some were voted out. Some were voted in. We see popular sovereignty in Colorado, where the voters said, you know what? We're tired of spending time, resources, and money putting people into the criminal justice system whose only crime, and I'm not trying to minimize it, is recreational consumption of marijuana. Well, they can eat it. I guess there are several ways that you can consume it. Eat it, smoke it. I don't know.
What?
Yeah.
Smoking it will be.
Yes, you're still consuming it. Yes. Washington's the same way. Maryland, in a step that many people see as a good and just thing, went to the polls and said, you know what, we will allow same-sex marriage, not civil unions, there's a difference, same-sex marriage in the state of Maryland. Many people herald that as a step towards equal rights. Locally in St. Louis, we see communities voting to not discriminate based on sexual orientation. How how you choose to live your life. Popular sovereignty. Now, popular sovereignty can go bad. The concept of popular sovereignty is the foundation for the border war between Missouri and Kansas. So popular sovereignty can be I guess one could say, mean, nasty, ugly thing. It's not a far leap to go from democracy to mob rule, is it? And when we see society ganging up, don't we see the rights of people oppressed? In the movie Lincoln, they're arguing about whether or not to pass the 13th or pass the 13th Amendment in the House of Representatives. And the violent reaction that just about every male, white male member of that House of Congress has at the mere thought of enfranchising African Americans, the mere thought of granting the right to vote to women, they rise up and violently denounce it. So popular sovereignty, it's this wonderful concept, but be aware, ladies and gentlemen, It can be dangerous. Rule of law. The people in their government must abide, that is a typo, must abide by a set of laws, rather than by arbitrary rules set down by any individual or group. The Constitution sets limits to governmental power and establishes how leaders who overstep their power can be removed. Simply put, it doesn't matter who you are, what elected position you have, we all have to follow the same set of laws. We all have to follow the same set of rules. Now, in a perfect world, does that happen?
Well, yeah, perfect world.
In a perfect world. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you what the ideal situation is. And I understand that we live in a society and we live in a world where equality, thank you, Mr. Rousseau, inequality is a permanent feature. The difference between the haves and the have-not. I get it. I'm not going to stand here before you and try to tell you that, oh no, it's all sunshine and daisies. Because it's not. I'm going to tell you what the rules are. I'm going to tell you how the world is. Now, figure it out and play by them. But there are rules that are set down. And when it comes to the Constitution of the United States, there are rules that says, no, you cannot do that. And we've seen instances where our elected officials have said, I'm going to do this. And the rule of law, the Constitution says, no, you can't do it. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, consistently top 3 president, if not number 1, every time they poll people. Even he was said, no, Mr. President, you're not going to do this. Harry S. Truman told no. Richard Nixon. We saw how that worked out for him. He had to resign. Why? Because he tried to abuse that power. I'm hard-pressed to look at all of those former presidents and not see where each one has probably been told no. You can't do that. Now, where Government Alive, the TCI book, and Magruder's separate are that Magruder's is going to tell you the separation of powers and checks and balances are 2 separate things. And I like how the Government Alive puts them together and says, hey, you know what? If you have separation of powers, you're going to have checks and balances. If you have checks and balances, you have to have separation of powers. Responsibility is divided among branches to prevent any one person or group from having too much power. And checks and balances allow them to monitor and check the power of others to prevent any abuse of power. Cards 5, 6, and 7 on that handout that we just went through clearly illustrate checks and balances. President of the United States, could he appoint his brother to be Attorney General? Yeah. The President of the United States could appoint me to be Attorney General. Scary proposition, okay?
So you don't have to have any qualifications?
No.
The Senate has to approve it.
Senate has to approve it. And that's where the Senate is going to go, excuse me, Mr. President, at what point in time does Mr. Easley have any qualifications to be the chief law enforcement officer for the nation? Well, he taught American government for 7 years. Oh, well, that's good enough. No. No, heck no. Checks and balances. We'll get into that. We'll see how each one is expanded upon. Federalism. This is a fun one because power being divided between central governments and the individual state governments. A little graphic there on the handout that I gave you shows that one huge rotunda, that dome over the entire nation. But then you see the borders for all the individual states. Ladies and gentlemen, we sleep under the blanket of 2 sets of laws at any given time in our life. At any given time during the day. You have state law and you have federal law. And we've already established through this previous exercise which one takes precedent, which one comes first. Federal, the supremacy clause of the Constitution. So what's going to happen in Colorado? What's going to happen in Washington State?
But it's within that state, not the country. So
But those national laws, because of the Constitution and the supremacy, Those laws must come first.
So what will happen?
Welcome to the court system. We're going to figure it out. Or as Governor Hickenlooper said, the night that Colorado voters approved that measure, that you can have in possession what amounts to about one joint because it's recreational use. I'm using it for personal consumption. He came out and flat out said, you know what? We're just now beginning down this path, so let's not break out the Cheetos just yet. Those were his words. Let's not break out the Cheetos just yet because we're still going to have to sort this out because federal law says marijuana is a Category 1 controlled substance, courtesy of the 1972 Federal Drug Act.
Why do you consider it a controlled substance?
Because of the 1972 Federal Drug Act that controls it, that identifies it as a Category 1 controlled substance with no medicinal purpose.
That's what it says?
That's
I'm paraphrasing.
Now there is a medicinal purpose.
Well, it's obviously incorrect, right?
And this is why we're going to have such a wonderful discussion on the concept and the topic of federalism.
So like, if it's against federal law, then how are the states passing these laws that say that everybody can smoke weed and everything? Yeah, how did it, like, that's, if it's against federal law.
That's in state law.
Because and if we're having a hard time understanding this now, nothing's really changed. Back in the day, you know, we're going to have state law that says slaves are illegal in this state, but legal in this state. It's going to be a discussion. It's going to be an argument. Will the federal government change its stance to allow federalism to happen? If the citizens of Colorado, through popular sovereignty, want to allow this, why should Washington, D.C. tell them no? If Missouri wants to allow physician-assisted suicide, and they go to the polls, and the people of Missouri said, you know what? If you have a diagnosis, stage 4, terminal, you're not going to get any better. And pain and suffering is in your future, and you don't want to go through that. And the citizens of Missouri vote on it. If there's a federal law that says no, who's to stop? If the people of Missouri think that's what's best for the people of Missouri. They're not trying to dictate what happens out of the border. They won't try to tell Illinois, Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, Arkansas, Oklahoma, now I'm into it, Tennessee, Kentucky, get all eight. They're not trying to tell them what to do. This is what we're going to do in our borders.
So does California have
Medicinal marijuana? Yep, them and 13 others, I think.
10? Yeah, but do they do recreational use too? Or
Nope, this is the first time that we went this route. Independent judiciary. But understand, federalism, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a fun topic. This is going to be a fun discussion. Because this is a current front burner issue. This is what's going on in America. Independent judiciary, I think we can pretty much translate that into what Magruder's calls judicial review. Okay. That the judicial branch is independent, free of pressures and influences from the other two branches. Why do you think justices serve for life? If you got a job for life, or as it says during good behavior, all you got to do is behave yourself. I wish I had that kind of job security. Then all I got to focus in on is on being a teacher. And by the way, the salary is set so that they don't really have to worry about money. I think they make somewhere in the neighborhood of 200,000, putting them in close to being in the top 1% of the nation. All they got to do is focus in on is being a judge. And we want them free and independent, don't we? Don't we want our umpires and referees to call a fair game?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. You recognize that. So you should be able to recognize an independent judiciary having that freedom. Not having to worry about keeping the job, not have to worry about being critiqued, not having, okay, fine. We're just going to rule on law. And finally, individual rights. This is the one where Magruder's and Government Alive really kind of differ. Government Alive will say that the Constitution, one of the principles that it protects is individual rights, and liberties are protected against governmental encroachment. One of the basis of what we see in the amendments, especially the first 10, the Bill of Rights. Government, you cannot do this. So we have enumerated and delegated powers. This is what you can do. And then we spell out, this is what you cannot do. Okay? Questions on any of these?
So, would medical marijuana be a federalist issue like
Oh. Depends on your stance. That's totally anti-federal. States' rights. Let the states determine what is best for them. Let the states have the right to determine their own course. Even if it flies in the face of what the national federal government says. And with that thought in mind, do we not see a possibility exists for federalism to almost be a laboratory for all the issues that America has? Think about it. Same-sex marriage. Euthanasia. Recreational drug use. It's happened. It worked fairly well for the speed limit. When I was your age, there was a federally mandated speed limit, 55 miles an hour. We'll jump it up to 65 on the interstates. That's it. I-70 from east to west, 65 miles an hour. Didn't matter whether you were in Illinois, Missouri, or Kansas. Didn't matter. 65. And finally, the federal government said, you know what, we're not going to look over this anymore. Let the states figure it out. Montana went buck wild. Safe and prudent during daylight hours. Didn't even put a number to it. Safe and prudent. I set the cruise control at 85, 90 miles an hour. And I was still being passed like I was sitting still. Yeah, there was an imbalance wheel. No.
I was a little more now.